Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip hip hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Genes.
Welcome to CutOff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, and I am a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the co-host and producer of this podcast. How is everything, Julie?
Everything is happening in the world.
Well, you know, there's a lot going on, but I'm encouraged every time I turn on social media, I see pictures of my friends, with their vaccine cards. My question is, how did you get it?
I know. Well, if you have conditions now, if you're under 65, I guess.
In California.
Yes, it depends on the state. There are some, my daughter just got a message from when she lived in Boston that she's eligible there. So she can get on a plane and go get a vaccination if she wants. But
I think I'm experiencing vaccine envy.
Yeah, maybe.
That's actually a pretty good drag name. Vaccine envy.
Vaccine. Vaccine is actually a really pretty word when you think about it, isn't it?
It is getting even prettier. If it means that I can go back to work and get back into life and see friends again in person.
Yeah.
Maybe even you, Julie.
That would be crazy.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
We went to a restaurant last night.
Really?
Yes, because it was our 25th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's wonderful.
Thank you. And it was very socially distanced.
Were you indoors?
We were, but we were in the bar and nobody was anywhere near us. But so I actually didn't, I was gone for the weekend and I didn't feel like going out and I didn't feel like drinking.
That's not like you.
I know. What's up with that? So my husband he said, well, I'm just going to go on a walk and I'll probably, go somewhere and eat something. And as he was leaving, he already had his headphones on. And as he was leaving, I was like, oh, honey, I'll go with you. Because I just felt but he didn't hear me because he had his headphones on.
And you thought he was ignoring you, and you said, "That's it."
I knew he couldn't hear me, but I was like, eh. So, he started to walk, and then about 15 minutes later, I was like, I feel bad. So I called him. I'm like, where are you? And he goes, well, I'm probably going to go to such and such. And I said, well, why don't I meet you there? He goes, oh, you don't have to. I'm like, you know what? Why don't I? It'll be great. It'll be good for us, and I'll, I feel better than I felt earlier today, and it'll be worth it. And hey, it's our anniversary. So we got there, and then the maitre d', if that's what you call him, I think he was a manager. So my husband's like, okay, she's here. And he said, okay, well, I have available is the bar and outside. And he's like, why didn't you tell me that before?
Oh.
Because that, he wanted to sit at a table with a tablecloth and,
Right.
Anyway, so he was a little cranky.
Well, I mean, when you were indoors, did you have any anxiety? Because I haven't sat in a restaurant in over a year, and I just wonder what that would feel like
I didn't have
now.
anxiety because we were well away from people.
Yeah.
I mean, there was nobody else in the bar but us. And our waiter had a mask and a shield. And, I felt, I was in Palm Springs this last weekend and didn't feel quite as safe. We ate outside, but at some point during the day, on the strip, it got super crowded. And we're like, okay, we're going back to the hotel now.
What were you doing in Palm Springs? I love Palm Springs.
I met my friend Betsy, who's been on the podcast before, who lives in Walla Walla.
Yes.
She was flying down with her daughter, and me and my daughter met her there.
Oh, that's fun.
It was fun. And that was...
Look at you traveling.
Look at me. I'm such a jet setter. That's the story. So happy anniversary, honey.
What's going on in DNA news, Julie?
Well, this was fascinating. Somebody posted a letter that they received from their confirmed biological father's lawyer.
Oh,
which is incredibly triggering. I'm just going to read what this man with a legal background wrote. Dear Ms. So-and-so, I am the attorney for so-and-so who has recently received a letter from you suggesting that you might be his biological daughter due to online DNA testing that has indicated that you may be a descendant of his parents. Okay, that's one thing. This was clincher for me. I understand from your online profile that you were raised by a loving father who passed away a few years ago. I am sorry for the loss of your father. That is so wrong on so many levels and neither here nor there.
What does it have to do with anything?
Nothing.
Right?
It has absolutely nothing. It is so ignorant, such an ignorant.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mr. So-and-so carefully contemplated your letter, and though it is possible that there may be a biological connection between the two of you, he was not your father. He feels that attempting to enter your life at this time would be disrespectful to the people who raised you. Out of that consideration, so-and-so respectfully requests that you refrain from contacting him or his family members any further. Thank you for respecting his wishes. Just so much triggering in that letter, which has zero legal standing, by the way.
I was going to say, it's really just meant to...
It's meant to intimidate her. And it's just hits on all the things that are incredibly triggering for an adoptee.
It's amazing that he got a lawyer involved.
I think it's
Maybe
a friend
it's a friend.
of his. Yeah, I do.
Because this is certainly not a case where you would warrant needing an attorney for anything at this point.
No.
It's not like she's trying to claim a fortune.
Exactly. But the cease and desist thing is tried on a regular basis. And, it's sad. It's sad. But just his wording, the thing about, just accusing her of being ungrateful and disloyal is such a low blow, and it's happened to me before, and it's
and the inference being like, oh well, you had a good father and he's gone, and that was your father,
right.
And therefore you shouldn't need to reach out to him. As
if her own history and DNA is of no value or importance.
It does remind me though, one of your In the Trenches stories fairly recently where you had reached out to a birth mother and you were contacted by a friend of hers, right? It wasn't actually the birth mother, it was her friend, and
yes.
she was sort of acting as an intermediary, basically the attorney. She
right.
wasn't an attorney,
right?
But I'm just saying she was that person
yes.
that was just sort of trying to suss you out,
yes.
right?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, it's interesting because men get hostile and threatening. I'm just going to say this. And women get just freaked out and scared.
Well.
But in that particular case, I don't think the mother has come around at all. But I believe there are certainly other issues at play as far as mental health goes, which may have been, which may have started with the being forced to give up her child.
Right. And I will say, asking a friend to reach out isn't as bad as asking an attorney.
Oh, no, yeah. It's not meant to intimidate.
Right. Even if your friend is an attorney, they shouldn't need to say that they're an attorney because
that's the intimidation factor
right.
of it, as if this is going to make it all go away.
Because in essence, you are an intermediary,
I am.
Between your client and the birth parent that you're reaching out to.
And I don't always like that role.
Right.
Because and a lot of people don't like it that there is an intermediary involved either. I mean, if I do reach out, because through my company that I work for, that is what is part of the service. And so I do it, but if I don't get a response, I will then encourage the adoptee to follow up themselves, because sometimes the response is just because, who is this stranger trying to get up in my business?
Well, it's amazing. I mean, every family is different, and we all have our own weirdness within families.
Yeah.
But I have experienced within my family, on my dad's side, this kind of fierce protectionism and like privacy. Not even about anything with adoption or anything, but just certain things that happen within the family. Oh my God, you should never have told that to anybody else. That kind of thing. It's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, people are...
Look at I don't know enough about it to really discuss it in detail, but look at what happened recently with the Meghan Markle interview and with Oprah. But people who have nothing to do with the royal family are up in arms on either side of whether she should have or shouldn't have, whether it's her right to or whether it's embarrassing the queen. And they're not even a member of that family.
Right, right. Yeah. I have a problem with, not so much here, but in England and Australia, there's a whole faction of people who don't like Meghan Markle and think that she's a gold digger. And I think, I believe that this bias is racially charged.
I think there's a lot to that, but I digress.
All right, let's see. Oh, I came across this article that said, research suggests people who believe they were unwanted or unplanned babies likely have more troubled close relationships. No duh. So it was interesting. It says findings appearing in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships show people who believe they resulted from unwanted or unplanned pregnancies tend to have more insecure relationships as adults. Omri Gillat, the professor of psychology at the University of Kansas, says, I know people who went through such a process and found out they were probably unplanned or unwanted in the way they behave and talk about their close relationships. It was clear to me that this revelation or knowledge had an impact on how secure and loved they feel as adults. Psychologists refer to the way people think, feel, and behave in close relationships as their attachment style. I talk about attachment style a lot with my therapist because that is pretty much the crux of my psychoses in life.
Do most people, and I mean most people, obviously people who are not adoptees, do they know whether they were planned or not? I never asked my mother that.
Okay, so that was the point I was getting to. As I read through this, I realized that this article is just about people whose parents said, well, you were a surprise. Or, yeah, all of a sudden, 10 months later after your brother or sister, there you were. It has been intimated to them that they weren't planned. That has affected their attachment style. So imagine, if you will, the life of an adoptee who came into the world knowing that somebody didn't want them, and then were raised as a part of a family, which, and generally is, especially when I was adopted, supposedly you were told that you would they were told that you would just seamlessly blend into the family and no one would be the wiser because we don't have a past or a genetic past. So I found it fascinating. This entire article was just about, people who knew both of their parents but weren't necessarily planned.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't read this article, so I can't really speak on it. But in my opinion, I think what has to do more with this is how you are raised, not necessarily whether you were planned or not. Because I imagine a baby that is unplanned can be just as loved,
of course,
as someone who was planned. So it's not that act of whether you were planned; it's how you were raised, as if you were wanted in the first place.
This entire story is just warning parents about telling their children that they were a surprise.
Probably not a good idea.
Yeah, probably not.
I just, again, I never asked. I never wanted to know that. Never even thought about it.
I will say my son was planned, but we tell the story a lot because for a long time we were going to just have the one child, Lily. Okay, and then our close friends started having their first babies. And when I was pregnant with Lily, none of my friends had babies and none of my friends were pregnant. And I was lonely. Okay. Then all of a sudden, friends and relatives started having babies, and we're like, might be kind of fun to, have kids the same age, And so Lucky is my husband, agreed, well, let's just see what happens. Let's not try to not get pregnant.
We'll throw caution to the wind.
Exactly. Well, lo and behold, one time, and I'm pregnant.
Well, there you go.
And my husband loves to talk about how, because I am not a happy pregnant girl. And so all of the fun involved in having in getting pregnant is pretty sparse when I'm pregnant.
Well, this is funny that this came up today because I literally just yesterday spoke with my niece and she's pregnant. So she's due next month and I haven't seen her, but she told me, she's like, Uncle Richie, I am so ready to have this baby. And she says, I don't know why. Now, this is her second child.
Right.
And she goes, I don't know why. I don't remember feeling this tired. And I said, honey, you didn't have a baby that you're taking care of the first time.
Right.
So now she's running around chasing after a toddler
Yeah.
and she's pregnant. So she's exhausted.
Which is why there are 5 years between our kids, by the way, because I could not have done it that close together.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No,
couldn't.
I think her son is less is a year and a half.
Yikes.
So,
yeah. Most of my friends did it that way, and I get it, but
yeah.
they're stronger women than myself.
But to the point, I didn't ask her, oh, did you plan on having a second child this soon? You know, I mean, knowing her
nobody's
and her
business.
husband,
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was interesting because I flagged that article because I was like, ooh, interesting. I get this. And then I realized it's just about, and not to minimize people who think they weren't planned. But it's so funny how that is a psychosis, if you will, when adopted people are so often not allowed to express their feelings about being adopted in very much the same way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I wanted to read really quickly about this whole attachment style thing because I think it's important. People can be either anxiously attached, concerned about being abandoned and rejected, or they can be avoidantly attached. That's me, guys. They try to downplay the importance of close relationships and suppress their emotions. Alternatively, they can be securely attached when they feel comfortable or at ease in close relationships and are not worried about trust, dependence, or getting too close or not close enough to others. Attachment style plays a role in romantic relationships, but also in people's relationships with siblings, friends, and others in one's social orbit. So my attachment style is very much focused, my focus in my therapy, because it has informed my entire life. It has been the what is happening in the back of my mind and in my psyche unconsciously for years. And the fact that I know that now about myself, that I can name it and know exactly where it comes from and it's validated is huge to me. I mean, it's still there, and I still feel it.
But knowing about
yes.
it makes a difference. Sure.
Absolutely, and it explains a lot to a lot of people about me.
Well, let's ponder that on the break.
All right, let's do that.
If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Jeans Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
All right, we're back. I have a doozy of a trench story.
I want to hear a doozy.
Oh, boy.
Do you have a dipsy doozy?
It's a dipsy doozy. All right, so this is, here's a From the Trenches that is also a cautionary tale. I like to tell a lot of those. And we're actually in the midst of this right now.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to use some fun pseudonyms because it's easier to identify who is who. So
Great.
We're going to do it that way instead of saying so-and-so or blah, blah, blah.
Pseudonym.
Nice. Nice, Phil Collins. Okay. So have this client that I've had him for about 2 weeks now. And when I first got the case, noticed that the DNA was his daughter's DNA. It was not his DNA, which is the first thing that makes me go, ugh, really would rather be working with your DNA. The daughter's DNA means, yes, she has your DNA, half your DNA, but also half of her mother's DNA.
What's the big deal with him taking a DNA test?
Well, he just hadn't gotten around to it, and he was willing to do it. If necessary.
He's the client, right?
Yeah, she had taken it, but he thought, and he had figured out who his father was through his daughter's DNA. So, he wasn't thinking it was necessary. And so when I spoke to him, I said, I really would prefer for you to do the DNA because this is just makes it much more complicated. But I'll let you know by Monday. And this was like Friday. I said, I'll let you know by Monday if we need it.
All right.
So I spent that entire weekend working on the case, and I actually solved it over the weekend. So
wow,
didn't need it. So I called the guy the client on the Monday, and I said, well, you're not going to need to take a DNA test. And he said, why? And I said, because I found your mother. And he burst into tears and was so emotional about it. And his partner was on the phone with him, and she did most of the talking because he was so overwhelmed. And he was saying that his birthday was the coming Saturday, and he wanted nothing more than to hug his mother on his birthday.
God. Wow.
Which immediately made me go, oh, that's quick.
Yeah.
That's really soon.
She doesn't even know you yet.
So, you know that I prefer to write letters. And I had found, so once I found out who she was, I knew what her maiden name was. And her name, he had his birth certificate, and so he knew what her name was too. Trouble with women is they get married and lose their maiden name, and that's why they're so much harder to find than men.
That's the trouble with women.
And that's the only trouble with women. But because I found her marriage announcement that named her parents, her husband's name, and her husband's parents' names, that was 2 years after my client was born. And it had her maiden name and her married name. So I was like, I do know they also divorced about 8 years later. So, the I'm thinking maybe she still uses that name. So I did what I do.
Do most women keep their married name after they divorce? Especially if there's no children involved?
Yeah, if there's, I think they do if there's children involved. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. There didn't appear to be children involved in this one.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would just say I wouldn't think that I would think you'd revert back to your maiden name or something.
Until you get
because
married.
I don't know.
Her maiden name, let's say it was Baxter, which it wasn't. But it's a relatively common name. Several people by that name in the area that she's from. Nobody fit the criteria exactly and it just didn't match up because I knew quite a few facts about her from the non-ID, if it was true. The married name, however, I found somebody who fit exactly. And she was still using that married name, even though she had for some reason children using another husband's name. So she did have children after that marriage.
She got remarried.
Right, but she was using, and that husband had died, but she was using the married name that I had found. So that was one red flag, but that was it. So I found her on Facebook and did looked through her page, and she seemed lovely. There was just something about her that I felt like she would be really open to this. But I just felt like this was important to him, and my boss would and if he wanted me to call, I kind of had to, because that's what my company does. So
sure.
Fine. So I called and I got her voicemail and I left a message basically saying, and by the way, let's say the married name is Bjorgi.
From Baxter to Bjorgi.
So I left a message for her and said, I'm reaching out for a family member, and I would love to talk to you about that. Usually a biological mother will know exactly what I'm talking about.
I was just going to say, because to me, if I were to get a call like that, I would think this is a scam.
Right, unless you're a biological mother.
Right, in which case
they found me. Right,
the jig is up.
So, and I did that, and I crossed my fingers and hoped I'd heard back from her. About an hour later, my phone rings, and it's from that number that I called. And I answered it, and she said, "Is this such and such a towing company?" And I said, "What? No." And she said, "Oh, I thought it was." And I said, "Wait, is this?" Let's say her name was Marcy. "Is this Marcy?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh."
She hadn't heard your message.
Right, but she just called the last number on her phone.
Oh, right. No. And you couldn't even get her a tow.
I wanted to help her. So she said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, I did call you, though. You mustn't have listened to the message. And I would like to talk to you, but it's not about getting your..." And she goes, "Well, I'm in a ditch. So she was in a storm and she was waiting for a tow truck to come and get her out. So, and she was adorable and cute and giggly. And like I said, well, I actually, there's something else I'd like to talk to you about. Could I maybe talk to you about it while you're waiting for the tow truck? And she said, I think I'd rather get out of the ditch first, which is fair enough. And I said, okay, fine. I said, you know what? When you get a chance, please listen to the message and give me a call back. So then I called my client and I told him. He was so excited. Did not hear back from her. Later. I called and left a follow-up message. Then I sent an email to her and didn't hear back. Finally, my client was getting more and more frustrated.
I hope she got out of the ditch.
Well, that was his concern. Now he was worried that she didn't get out of the ditch because he's a medical professional. So he started calling and leaving messages. And it was going straight to voicemail. It wasn't even ringing. So it was starting to look not good. So as the week went on, so his birthday was coming up. I'd not heard back from her.
Were they in the same area of the country or no?
Yes, but 6 hours away.
Okay.
Here's what happened. He and his partner drove 6 hours to the town where she lives and stayed there and visited friends there, but stayed there for his birthday weekend in the hopes that she would call.
Oh,
and
this is kind of
I
heartbreaking.
know, and she never did. So on Monday, I call him. I'm like, what is going on? He's like...
And she has to know that it was his birthday, too.
Yes.
Because a mother doesn't forget that.
Right. And I did mention it. I said in the email, I understand this may take some processing, but please know that he is very emotional when I told him that I'd found you and that he expressed his desire to give a hug on his birthday to the woman who gave birth to him. So then he started he was like, I just now I understand if she doesn't want, because this is a thing, I understand that she maybe doesn't want to talk to me, or if this was a traumatic situation, but now I'm just really worried about her health. I'm really worried that she didn't get out of the ditch and she was in a worse condition than we thought. Which would make sense because nobody's heard back from her. So he was really worried. So I talked to my boss and I said, look, this is the deal. He's worried. And he goes, well, reach out to her, to her children, maybe. And I avoid doing that as much as possible because if it's a secret, I don't want to be the one to break it to them. If there's a chance.
Could you have just checked her Facebook to see if she had posted again?
I did. She hadn't. She hadn't posted in a couple of years.
It wasn't like she posted, I'm stuck in a ditch, help me.
So he said, you know what, I'll try calling her. And so then yesterday, I get a text from him that said, I'm talking to Marcy Bjorgi right now as we speak, and she says it's not her. And I was like, uh-oh. And so I went back and I was looking at the tree and I'm like, how can this not be her? And she said her father is Canadian. During that time when he was born, she was living in such and such a place, blah, blah, blah. It's not her. I was like, oh no, did I make a terrible mistake? And he said he believes her, that it's not her because she was very nice and she felt badly that she couldn't help him.
It's odd that she wouldn't have returned the calls, though.
Yeah.
At least to you, to say, you know what, I would call somebody
right.
back.
That was
and
why
say,
I didn't 100% believe it at first. I'm like, well, then why didn't she just say, it's not me?
I mean, on a side note, when a client calls me about a wedding and leaves a message and says, I need a pianist on June 7th.
Yeah.
If I'm booked on June 7th, I call them back and I say, I'm so
that they
sorry.
look
I don't
elsewhere.
just let.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't just like leave them hanging.
Exactly.
And this is something even more emotional than a wedding.
Right. Right. So, yeah, I'm not sure why she waited so long. And actually, she didn't call him back. I think he finally got through to her. So I went back and looked again and realized that those red flags had actually been red flags. I had the correct person. The person that I'd found, her maiden name was Baxter. No, the biological mother's maiden name was Baxter. Her married name was Bjorgi, and she lived in the same area, and she was exactly the same age, but it was the wrong person. So we had been reaching out to the wrong person all along. Even though I didn't make a mistake in the DNA, I am right about who the mother is. But she happens coincidentally to have that name now. And the only other red flag was that the middle names had the same initial, but they were different names. And I just thought maybe she changed it because things like that happen all the time.
So there were two people in the same town or same area that had the same name.
Yes.
And they were the same age.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And the name is not Bjorgi. It's a little more common than that.
Right.
But
well, say it's Smith, but yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's
So I realized I was back to the drawing board, and I called him and I said, "This is what happened. I'm so sorry, but sometimes, biological, women lose their maiden names. And granted, the maiden name was nowhere in the ID that I found, but it usually isn't with women, unfortunately. So."
I still think that woman should have called back and said, there's been a mistake.
Right.
I know, I'm not lying.
I wish that had happened, but oh well. Yeah. So it could have been. We could have got him his birthday hug had we known the first day. Anyway, so
did you find the real person?
So I called him and I said, "Look, I'm so sorry. It's the wrong person," and he was so relieved because he knew he had another chance to talk because he thought she was rejecting him.
And he knew she was not in a ditch somewhere.
Exactly. So, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, well, back to the drawing board. So this time I went through. So we still have the problem with the name. And there is nobody else with that name now, but she got divorced, 30 years ago. And may have remarried, is probably remarried, but I have no way of knowing what that name is, what her married name is. So I went back to the DNA, and there is a first cousin once removed, which is the client's daughter's DNA, which means that person is a first cousin to the client, which is how I identified who her mother was, because her father is his uncle. So I ended up just calling him. Now, here's the thing. When you're calling a family member but don't want to give it away, it feels kind of dirty to lie outright. But at the same time, you want to protect that biological parent if it's a secret.
I mean, aren't you sort of calling and saying, like, I'm looking for so-and-so whose maiden name was this?
Right, but they want to know why. I mean, they're like, well, why are you calling me? Right. So I kind of intimated that we had gone to college together in the town that she went to college in, and I was an old friend, and I knew that last time I saw her name was this, but, is that her name now? And, of course, he wouldn't tell me what her name now was, and he said, but I'll call her, and if she wants to call you, she can call you.
Right, but of course she's not going to know you because you're not a college friend.
So I just said, well, I said, my name is Julie and this is my number. So she, she might be curious. I don't know. But I didn't have too much hope that was going to happen. Well, an hour later, I get a phone call from yet another state that is not involved in any of this. And I pick up and I said, this is Julie, and silence, but there's somebody there. And I said, this is Julie. Hello. And then I heard, hello, it's a woman's voice. And I said, yes, this is Julie. And then she hung up. I was like, oh, now.
Did it sound like she was in a ditch?
It did not sound like she was in a ditch.
Okay,
no,
good.
It did not. And I've been waiting I'm waiting to hear from another biological mother from that particular state. So I went and looked at the numbers to see if any of those were hers. Wasn't her. So now I have this number, and I don't want to call her back and freak her out, or maybe it was just a wrong number. So here's a little trick, everybody. If you are a subscriber to Been Verified, this is actually a really useful tool. They have the phone number lookup. So I can punch that phone number into their phone number lookup, and it will tell you who it's registered to. So I did that, and it was registered to somebody whose last name was, say, Jones. And it was a gentleman. Well, then I could go to his Been Verified report, and it could tell me who he's related to in the been verified report, which isn't always accurate. However, his wife's name was Marcy Jones. So it was her. Wow. I knew that it was her. So she had made the mistake, if she was trying to hide, of calling me back and me being able to use the phone number lookup. So that happened last night, and I've not moved forward with it. I'm not really sure how to do. I haven't had time to talk to my client yet.
This is like a cliffhanger.
I know.
I
know. It's true.
I'm on pins and needles here. I'm the edge of my seat.
Well, I don't know how it's going to end either. So,
well, you have to tell us.
Of course
time,
I will. Of course I will. I hope it goes well. I just want to get.
I do too.
I want to get a beat from him as to how he wants to proceed. I'm a little gun shy about the cold calling thing now because of what happened last time. Even though I know I have the right person this time.
Right.
But
I think. I mean, I don't want to fault him because the poor guy. Obviously, it's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
But it's quite a large expectation to want to hug your birth mother on your birthday when you've just found her within a few days of that.
And this is why I tell people to manage their expectations as well. I mean, I totally feel for him, and he's obviously wears his heart on his sleeve.
I totally get it. I totally get it. But yeah.
Right. So, that's
baby steps. Literally baby steps.
Baby steps, little tiny baby steps.
I'm going to take a baby step to break.
That's a good idea.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Jeans with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/Cut Off Jeans podcast. Now, back to the program.
Okay, everybody, it is story time, and this is the second and final chapter of Cory Goodrich's NPE story.
Oh, good. Where did we leave off last week?
We left off. Cory was with her mother, and her mother very casually mentioned an affair that she had had with somebody and acted like Cory had known about it all along,
that's
thinking that she had told her something like that. And she talked about the wife of the person she had an affair with, coming to her and asking her to leave her husband alone. And she said she did. And that was where we left off.
Ooh, good story.
Yeah.
Let's listen to part 2 at the end.
But, she said, the woman, his wife came to the house, and she begged me not to take her husband. And she was very well dressed and very poised. I was very impressed with her.
Oh.
And I'm driving through Green Valley going,
interesting.
Well, so what did you do? Did you leave him alone? And she said, yes, I left him alone. And that was it. I didn't push any further. Stupid.
Your restraint is amazing. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know what to think. I mean, I also did not want her upset. This was right before her surgery.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was terrified to fight with her. I didn't want another one of those arguments,
Of course.
So I just kind of let it go, and then she had the surgery, and she lasted about a week before she eventually passed away.
I'm sorry.
And the next day, thank you. That was really hard. She died on Friday the 3rd. Wait, she died on the 12th, but the next day was Friday the 13th, which is hilarious to me, because on Friday the 13th, I say, I want to go through her things. And, my Susie and Dale were like, it's too early. We don't really want to do this. But I'm like, no, I want to go through her pictures for her celebration of life, because I want to find that picture. I want to find the picture of the man holding me as a baby.
Right.
Specifically. Now, I know that she has gone through her memories, and she's carefully curated them because of, some things my stepfather had said. She had shredded letters she didn't want, us to find, to preserve her reputation. So I knew that this was going to be a curated box, and sure enough, I get the box, the same box, a flowered, yellow flowered box from 1970 that was in the house in Michigan when we looked at the pictures. And we start going through it, and it's all organized. And there are pictures of sections of pictures of her mother and father, which I'd never seen. She had never showed me any of these. There were reviews from when she was a singer, which I knew she was, but I knew she hated it. And I had asked for pictures, and she said, no, I don't have any.
Oh,
she
my
had
gosh.
them. So I'm going through these, and then there's an envelope, manila folder, with 3 letters in it and 2 pictures.
Oh.
The 2 pictures are the picture of the man holding me as a baby. But I go to the letters first because I'm going to delay this. a little bit longer.
Sure.
And she saved 2 letters from Tom, from my father, to her. There's no other letters in the box. It's just these two specific letters, which he wrote shortly before he died.
Tom, who you call Daddy?
Tom Goodrich.
Okay.
Yeah, Daddy.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And in these letters are both ones shortly before he died saying how proud he was of me and how much he loved me. And I know instantly that my mother has kept these because she wants me to know that Daddy loves me.
Yeah.
And these are the only 2 letters, right? So then I look at the picture of the man with the baby, and I hold it up to my siblings. I'm like, hey, did I tell you guys what she said in the car about having an affair? Is this the guy? My poor brother, just turns white. He's like, yeah, I think so, yeah. And I said, well, what do you know about him? And he said, well, his name was, well, no, first I said, what do you remember about him? He says his name is Don Garnett. And I said, well, what do you know about the relationship? And he says, how much do you want to know?
Oh, my God.
And I knew in that second, I'm like, oh.
I have chills.
No.
Okay.
And I said, is he my father? Is he my real father? And he said, yeah, I think so.
Oh.
You used to call him Daddy Don.
Oh.
So, which I guess he has pointed out since. He's like, I didn't say that. He said, our father, Daddy, used to call him Daddy Don to me. So I need to correct that mistake. But
wow.
At the time, I thought it was, my nickname for him. So I like the visceral feeling, which I write about in the book, of the floor dropping out from under me. It's like every cliche that you could ever think of are these moments, just lost in space,
Yeah.
So I get up because I'm like, okay, I got to go. And he says, well, here, I pulled this letter out of that envelope too. You need to see this. I didn't want you to see it. And it was a letter from Don Garnett to my mother. I won't talk about what's in it because that's their business, and
sure.
I don't feel right, releasing that. But the gist of it was, the last line was, hope you and Cory are well.
Oh.
So he's named me. He's stated that she is a woman that he loved, and that he wanted to see me. And, so I'm like, I got to get out of here. I can't sit in this house another second. Grab my car keys, my mom's car keys, and Susie stands up and says, I have to tell you, I've known this since you were 2.
Oh my
that this is true, that Don is your father. So I flee the house, and I drive to the folk instrument store, of course, because where else do you go when you find out that you're, a quote-unquote illegitimate child? And
you go to the folk instrument store, and you buy a banjo,
right?
and you sing the blues. No, that's not
exactly.
with a banjo. Okay.
But I needed to get out of the house, So I got back, and we talked. They had known, but didn't know. I mean, it's not like they could confirm it, or
it was just
really
kind of a thing, common knowledge that everybody knew but didn't talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's her story. It's my mother's story. Like, they didn't feel like they had the right to tell me that. And Jim knew, my stepfather knew. And so the next few months were just crazy. Like me feeling like I've lost my identity, which is ridiculous because at the time I was 51. So, or was I 50? I don't know. Should I lie about my age? I was 32.
Yes. Let's go.
I was old. I've been me for a long time. It should not change how I feel, but it did. I had so many questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in order to that night after I got back from the folk instrument store, I Googled the name and Delaware, and the first hit on the Google search engine was an obituary of a man. And I knew the second I looked at him, that was my father. Now, he didn't die years and years ago when my mother said. He didn't have a heart attack and die then. He died just a year prior to this in 2016.
Oh, man.
So he'd been alive for this whole time. I kept searching because I wasn't sure. There was really no way to tell for sure that was my father. Eventually, I wrote to the funeral home. I asked them to give me the family's information. And Lee, who is Don's son, wrote me back. And he apparently, once he got me my inquiry, Googled me and saw my headshot. And I was like, oh, my God, I have a sister. He knew the second he looked at me. So we did a DNA test. We confirmed that we were indeed related. Right. And it goes from there. So he just became my best friend and confidant, and just opened his arms to me so beautifully and lovingly. And he tells me that I am the most like our father of anybody in the family, which is unbelievable because I didn't grow up with him. And so I really went through crazy just identity crisis and depression. I had suicidal ideation. I was crying all the time. Yeah. I thought it was abnormal, But of course, as the more we talk to other NPEs and people who are making this discovery later in life, this is normal. This is an absolutely normal response.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So 3 years later, here I am. I mean, I am more myself than I have ever been. I started painting because Don was a painter, and he and my mother met in art class. And so I'm like, I'm curious to see if I can paint. And I somehow genetically know how to paint. I can't explain it. I've never taken a lesson. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I know what I'm doing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and it's genetic or something.
It has to be. No, it has to be. You have just like your singing voice probably is the same as well.
Yeah, it comes from my mom. Sure,
exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mine comes definitely from my maternal side, and then my writing ability comes from my paternal side. I can see certain things that are absolutely genetic to me that have nothing to do with the family that raised me. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
So that's my story.
Wow. I love that you've connected with your brother. Do you have other siblings, other half siblings?
I do. I have two others, and with varying stages of wanting to know me or not, which is, that's totally understandable and fine, and I fully, respect that. And, I think I'm a heck of a gift. But
yeah, sure. But people
but it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to predict how. I have a half-sister on I just found my paternal side a couple years ago. And I have a half-sister that's 11 months younger than me that is really the only one in the whole family that could care less. And just doesn't. Yeah. She what?
What did you say? So you're connected with her or not?
No, not at all. Not at all. She won't. In fact, one of her daughters and I are Facebook friends, and I just wrote her one night saying, "Hey, is there an email or something for your mom? I'd just like to connect with her and, see it." And she goes, "I'm not the person to ask. We haven't spoken in a year." That's one of the reasons I wanted to connect with her because she left home very early and had a very contentious relationship with her father. And I just kind of want to know what that's about because he seems like a great guy. So I'm trying to fill in the gaps. I have to fill in the gaps with stories, from other people. And I'm lucky in that I have a series of letters that my father wrote to my grandfather for many years that a cousin gave me that are amazing, that is such an insight as to who he was. But
that's beautiful.
Yeah, but I would just really love to I have a sister on my mother's side as well, but I've known her for years and years and years, and we don't exactly connect. I mean, we did, but we're not really connected now. But, this is the one last thing because, I grew up without a sister, and have a sister to me has always been my greatest desire. But it's not going to happen. I mean, I can tell she's just not interested. and I should let it go, and I probably will. But every now and then I think I'm like, I just want to, let's just see if I can crack through. But
Right. I have that same reaction too. I'm like, do you want to know me yet? Do you want to?
Yeah. Yeah. Aren't you curious? I am such a curious soul. I have to know everything about everybody. One may call it nosy. I don't know, but and that's probably why I do this for a living. But I want to know everybody's story, and I just want, especially people that I am genetically connected to. Because I love stories, and I want to know, now that I know who I'm connected to, I want to know their story, and it's not always going to happen.
And that's why you were an actress.
It's so true. It's so true. It was so much, my life was so much easier when I was a working actress, not in that I got to make money in the profession, that my chosen profession, but just because it was like, I was just actually talking to my therapist about this morning. It was so much easier because I got to absolutely control the way everybody saw me. And I could control the narrative and hide all the flaws, and nobody saw my vulnerabilities. And I could pretend that, and I could literally make them feel about me the way I wanted them to feel about me. And it was just easy. And also, I wasn't trying to destroy their life.
Right.
As now people think I am.
Oh, no. Yeah, you and I are soul sisters in that, too. And that's really an interesting observation about controlling the narrative and making people like you and stuff, too.
Yeah.
I totally relate to that completely.
Yeah. And I mean, we have different stories. You're an MPE, so you grew up with one thinking, whereas I grew up always knowing I was adopted. And so always feeling the need to control the narrative or to come up with a narrative or just have a narrative. You know what I mean? It was always,
right.
I felt like everybody else's narrative was forced on me. I'm like, that's not who I am. What?
Well, I feel very fortunate in that, being an actress, like, I feel like this has been my research for my mother's story because I've played these roles because I did Francesca. And I'm always cast as the love interest in the triangle, Guinevere and Ragtime. And so this was so familiar to me, and it was easy for me to step in my mother's shoes because that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
I have to step in their shoes and see their motivations. And
Yeah, that's interesting too. It's like we're used to kind of becoming these people, and it's helpful to know. That's why we ask questions, I think, because we want to know what their motivations are, and it helps us to embody these other people and be more honest in our performance, I guess.
Right.
I don't know. There needs to be a musical. I'm surprised there hasn't been an MPE musical. I'm trying to, my co-host he writes musicals, and I'm like, you need to get on this. And
I love your theme song, by the way.
Thank you. I had him do that for me. It was fun.
So along with this book, right now I'm actually writing an album. I'm recording an album to go as a companion piece with it.
Oh, cool.
All the music that I referenced in the book and also some things that I wrote after the fact about my discovery. So we could turn that into a musical.
There you go. You should definitely. I mean, God, you have so much material. Also, I came across, I guess, a music video. Is it a music that you did simultaneously with the release of the book? Was that what it was?
So is this the Lonesome Valley? I
think you're walking in the snow.
Yeah. Yeah. My trailer.
It's been a while.
It's so theatrical. We made a movie trailer for my book.
Yeah. I thought that was a really cool idea.
Well, it is so the story is so theatrical to me, and because there is this narrative of music that I put throughout the book of songs that I was singing in my head and things that I remembered that I had written a long time ago, and I thought, well, this is going to be not just a book, but it's going to be an interactive piece somehow,
I love that.
So then the recording's coming next, and after that, I'm hoping that somebody will make a movie out of it, and Kate Winslet will play me. So.
Boom. Or you'll play you.
Maybe I could play me, but I could play
happens.
my mother.
Oh,
maybe I'd be my mom.
That's fun. Yeah.
So all those producers out there, put that in your head.
Okay, Cory, give us one more plug for the book and anything else you want to plug.
Sure. So the book is Folk Song, A Ballad of Death, Discovery, and DNA. My website, I have a couple, folksongbook.com is for the book. And then my website is CoryGoodrich.com, Cory, Goodrich, like the tires.com. And you can find my music, you can find my paintings, you can find reviews, who knows, maybe you'll unearth some skeletons on that website too, I don't know. But check it out and let me know if you've read it and if you've had responses and you want me to paint you a picture.
Cory Goodrich, thank you so much for talking to me. I feel like I just had a happy hour with a friend without the booze.
We can make the booze happen.
Let's do it next time. It's 2 hours earlier where I am than you, so I don't know.
It's the pandemic. Does it matter?
Yeah. What am I talking about? Yeah, you're right. Okay, we're going to do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you so much, Cory Goodrich, for that fantastic conversation.
I think everybody should go out and buy her book, Folk Song, A Ballad of Death, Discovery, and DNA by Cory Goodrich. I see that it's available on Amazon and probably your favorite booksellers. So
yes, it's also on Audible, or an audio book is available. I listened to it. So you get to hear her voice.
Well, this was a good episode, Julie. I enjoyed this.
Me too.
For all of you people out there, I am Richard Castle. You can go to my website, richardcastle.com, or you can also follow me on the Twitter, on Instagram, or SoundCloud at Castle Songs.
Fancy.
Yes.
Hey, I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. Find me at on the Twitter at Jules Jackson with 2 O's. Find the podcast on Twitter at CutOff Jeans Pod. Find us on Facebook, CutOff Jeans Podcast. And if you would like to send me a private message or hire me to help you in your journey, email at julesjackson@cutoffjeans.com.
Last time I was here, I told you that my jeans were ripped, and I ordered because I don't go into any stores anymore, I ordered them to be delivered.
But Rich, the truth is in your jeans.